I have finished reading Iron Prince, book 1 of the Warformed Stormweaver series. I finished it around midnight and then immediately went into book 2, which is a great sign. I definitely recommend these books. I'm reading this one as part of January, my month of progression fantasy novels. Technically this one is sci-fi, but it feels like fantasy, so I'm allowing it. And while reading this book, and book 2 afterwards, I noticed some surprising similarities to other books, including Fourth Wing, the steamy, sexy fantasy romance novel, which you would not expect to be similar to this young adult sci-fi progression novel. But they really are. So I wanted to make this video about books similar to Iron Prince, including some that are really surprising in their similarity. Similar book, or books number 1, is Cradle by Will White. This is not a surprise. The Cradle series is pretty much the gold standard of progression fantasy or cultivation fantasy. And in Iron Prince, as in Cradle, we've got a teenage boy, underdog, leveling up against the odds to eventually save the world with his friends and some eccentric teachers, and at least one entity learning how to interact with humans in a slightly comedic way. The Stormweaver series only has 2 books out so far, but there are some hints that in later books we might get some characters a little bit like Dross from Cradle, so fingers crossed for that. I love Dross and would like to see more Dross-like characters. We also have in both series the adorably awkward teenage romance between 2 characters who are far too focused on improving their battle skills to think about dating, but it's very cute when they do eventually think about dating. And generally, both series really great. The reading feel and experience really great. Cradle series and Stormweaver, if you enjoyed one, you will enjoy the other. Definitely recommend both. Similar book number 2 is Fourth Wing, or the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. And I'm gonna start off by saying, this is not a recommendation. I am not saying that if you liked Iron Prince, you should go read Fourth Wing, especially if you are genuinely the young adult readers of Iron Prince. This is an example of how much the tone of a book really matters, and how very, very similar plots can work out to be very different books in terms of your actual experience in reading them. Because these 2 books are really surprisingly similar. So bear with me on this. In both books, we have a teenage protagonist who has a medical condition since they were born that makes them quite unfit for fighting, and fighting in their particular worlds is quite important and prestigious. And in particular, their condition means that they're frequently hospitalized and in pain. So they don't necessarily have the strength and skills that the other teenage fighters might have, but they have endured a lot of pain. So they've got the resilience to overcome pain and keep going. And despite the odds, they make it past the hard selection test and get into the prestigious military battle school. And specifically, the battle school for a prestigious branch of the military. So they're not just going to be infantry grunts. They are going to be these special elite fighters who are paired up with a named magical or sci-fi battle buddy entity thing, and they're going to learn to be super fighters. And battle school is quite tough for them. There are a lot of other students who resent them being there because they don't seem like someone who belongs in the school. They're weak. How did they get in? Why are they here? And that animosity turns violent in both cases. They do have to deal with real violence from their fellow students who do not like the idea of them being here. And to make matters worse, or better, see as we go, the protagonist doesn't get bonded with just any battle buddy. They get this absolutely unprecedented battle buddy that manages to be both a huge advantage and a huge disadvantage. Our protagonist does get a couple of good friends in battle school. Specifically, your protagonist in either book will end up with a queer female best friend, and then a goofy guy making your initial trio of friends that does eventually grow beyond that trio. There's student v student fights in the school as part of the regular curriculum, and of course, they go a little bit over the top, with students being quite resentful of our protagonist. And the protagonist has to come up with some sneaky or clever solutions to get through school in ways where they struggle, where the other students just wouldn't struggle as much. We also have this behind the school, there's this overall plot that there's a big world-threatening something happening. This threat is growing behind the scenes, and we, the reader, know that the protagonist is going to be quite essential, or at least the protagonist's battle buddy is going to be quite essential in addressing and defeating this big growing evil. So very, very similar plots. Seriously, these two books are so similar in plot. The big difference is the sex. So Fourth Wing is very graphic and has a lot of sexual content, and that's a huge part of the book. It's a romance novel, and even when we're not in sex scenes, you can tell that we're leading to the next sex scene or building character interactions towards the next sex scene, compared to the young adult Iron Prince novel where we're getting towards, like, awkwardly holding hands is about the level of graphic content that we get. Very different tone and reading experience, but really similar plots. I do definitely still recommend Iron Prince to adult readers, even though it is a young adult book, and honestly, the romantic relationships described in the young adult books do still apply to adult romances. Many adults still get awkwardly nervous at the beginning of a relationship about, you know, like, putting your hand on their knee or holding hands. It's true, and it's adorable. Oh, and another thing, this does not matter to the plot at all, but it's just another similarity that stuck out to me, is that both books have really unrealistic, vibrant hair color. So, doesn't matter to the plot, matters a bit to me. I noticed these things. So in Fourth Wing, it's a fantasy series, and they're at the technology level of writing with quills and drinking from pewter cups, or pewter tankards, I think, even. And yet they have vibrant magenta hair dye. That is a really difficult color to get into dye, and they just, like, it's not the rich elite have this. This is just a thing that everyone would have access to, and characters can casually say, oh, you should dye your hair this color, it'd be fun. That is something that just would not be available. That is a huge technological jump above what you're talking about in this book. Doesn't matter to the plot, does kind of annoy me. And then in Iron Prince, it's sci-fi, it's not fantasy, but a lot of the characters have been genetically engineered, and plot-wise, this is mostly used to allow characters to be super physically intimidating and physically superior. So there, you know, our underdog guy has to fight people who are like 8 feet tall, and that's possible because they've been genetically engineered. But this genetic engineering is pretty limited to normal human attributes, so you can extend beyond what's normal, so you can make a human 8 feet tall, but there are no humans who have, like, wings and gills. We're still sticking within human. And they also have these aesthetic genetic modifications, which seems plausible in what people would do. So they, you know, control eye color, hair color, and stuff, and they end up with, like, blue hair through genetic engineering. And that's just not realistic, and I want to make a whole separate video, science video on this one. Think about an animal that is naturally blue. You're probably going to think of an insect, a bird, or a fish. These are blue, but they achieve that blue color using structural color, not pigment. And very, very basically, structural color uses shape to manipulate light, the actual wavelengths of light, to kind of produce the effect of a color, but it's not a pigment. It's similar to the idea of as light passes through a prism, and then you get white light going into a prism, and the whole rainbow coming out of the prism, based on the shape of that prism. It's a different process, but it also does use shape on the nanoscale. There are these teeny tiny little nanoscale features that cause different colors of light to interact with each other, such that the light that actually comes off of the thing and makes it to your eyes is a particular color, and it's what gives it that iridescent shimmery effect, and you'll notice that if you look at it from slightly different angles, it appears to be slightly different colors because your perspective is part of the shape. And just overall, it would not work in hair color. You could not put structural color into hair and have it appear blue. This needs to come from pigment, not structural color. There are blue pigments in nature in plants. So like flowers that are blue are pigment blue, not structural color blue. But the idea that you would use genetic engineering to that extent, like human plant crossover genetic engineering, when you've otherwise stuck to basic human elements, just kind of expanding them a little bit, the amount of inherent medical risk and danger and other factors you'd have to account for in adding plant DNA into humans just to get an aesthetic effect of hair color, when you haven't gone to any extreme like that to give them actual functional advantages, seems hugely unrealistic. And again, entirely irrelevant to the plot. This is just a whole side tangent that has no impact on how much you're going to enjoy the book, unless you, like me, are really interested and focused on hair color. I'd love to be able to just genetically engineer my hair to be these colors, but that would not be as easy as it sounds. Similar book number 3 is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This is another one where the tone of the book and the actual reading experience is quite different, even though the plots are remarkably similar. But this one is still safe to recommend to everyone, unlike Fourth Wing, which is a bit steamy. So in these two books, Iron Prince and Ender's Game, we follow a teenage protagonist boy who goes off to elite battle school, and the higher-ups in the military organization running this elite school decide that they need to push this kid hard, like unreasonably hard, to the point of hospitalization hard, in order to save the world. And our protagonist kid uses clever tricks to win fights at schools. This starts to get the attention of the other students. They initially looked down on him because he was weaker and smaller, and so they sort of dismissed him. Then as he starts winning, the animosity starts building. They resent him for beating them, essentially. And one similarity between these books I really like is there's a conversation that takes place between two not the main characters in both books, where one person is admonishing the other one for being so mean-spirited towards this kid, specifically because this kid is going to be essential to saving the world in the future. So the idea is, you know, stop hating on this kid, stop being petty, forget how you personally might feel. You need to make sure this kid is still able to save all of us in the future. And I found that quite a remarkable similarity to take place. Overall, again, the reading experiences of these books very different. I'd best describe the difference as smiling. So reading Stormweaver, or the Iron Prince books, the Iron Prince and the Stormweaver books, you're going to smile more than when you're reading Ender's Game. Ender's Game is written a bit more for cynical adults, even though it has younger characters than Stormweaver. It's written for a more adult audience, and it's more about exploring the hypothetical concepts, whereas the Stormweaver series is more about the characters, their experiences, their growth, their journeys, and overall it is a YA book. It's a young adult book. It is more lighthearted of a read, and very enjoyable. Do recommend them both. Similar book number 4, or book series, is Scholomance by Naomi Novak. These books are a recommendation. If you enjoyed Iron Prince and the Stormweaver series, you will enjoy Scholomance, and vice versa. They're very similar tone and both very enjoyable book series to read. This one is another YA Battle Academy setting. We have our main character who is initially quite hated for seeming so weak and terrible at everything, though they do eventually get strong and awesome. There's an adorable teenage romance developing between our so weak and terrible mean character and the school's absolute superstar golden child. And in both series, there's one adult character who is aware of the role that our main character is going to play in saving the world, but can't share that information yet. Also, both series have some representation of LGBT characters, which is great, and something that I'm noticing a lot more of in YA books, which is also great. Differences are Iron Prince is technically sci-fi, even though it feels like fantasy. Scholomance is 100% fantasy. Protagonist in Scholomance is female. Iron Prince protagonist is male. Scholomance is not progression fantasy, though it is a magical academy. Iron Prince is also a magical academy, even though I read it because it's progression fantasy. So there's some overlap there in the subgenres as well, and overall they feel very similar reading experience. If you liked one, you like the other. If you haven't read either, I'd recommend both. They're both great. And that's it for now. I will close off saying, for the record, at the time of recording, I am at, bing, 63% of the way to my goal of 10,000 hours of fantasy books. I'll do another video at the end of January that goes over all of my exploration of progression fantasy and cultivation fantasy this month. In that, I'll touch on a couple of topics that have come to mind as I go through this subgenre, including different types of creativity in different fantasy genres. I'm noticing a lot more brainstorming creativity in progression fantasy compared to problem-solving creativity in some of the other subgenres, as well as this common theme in progression fantasy of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which is a genuinely problematic view to have in the real world, and especially in a time in the world where mental health issues are skyrocketing, especially among younger people, and this genre focuses really heavy on young adult books. Definitely a conversation that deserves a bit more thought and consideration, but I will get into that in the later video, so for now, cheers! And that's it for now. I will close off saying, for the record, at the time of recording, I am at, bing, 63% of the way to my goal of 10,000 hours of fantasy books. I'll do another video at the end of January that goes over all of my exploration of progression fantasy and cultivation fantasy this month. In that, I'll touch on a couple of topics that have come to mind as I go through this subgenre, including different types of creativity in different fantasy genres. I'm noticing a lot more brainstorming creativity in progression fantasy compared to problem-solving creativity in some of the other subgenres, as well as this common theme in progression fantasy of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which is a genuinely problematic view to have in the real world, and especially in a time in the world where mental health issues are skyrocketing, especially among younger people, and this genre focuses really heavy on young adult books. Definitely a conversation that deserves a bit more thought and consideration, but I will get into that in the later video, so for now, cheers!